The Caribbean Sea slept under a velvet sky, dark and endless. Waves shimmered like molten glass under the moonlight, disturbed only by the silent advance of the USS Jason Dunham, 9,200 tons of American steel cutting through the deep. It was 4:37 a.m. The ship's wake stretched behind it like a scar of silver. On deck, the night smelled of salt, diesel, and stillness. Inside the Combat Information Center, screens glowed a ghostly green. A dozen sailors hunched over consoles, the hum of machines filling the air. It was supposed to be another uneventful patrol, 317 men and women rotating through shifts, guarding invisible trade lanes that carried the blood of modern civilization. Oil. Then a tone broke the calm. Not loud, not long, just a single electronic pulse that made every head lift. Contact? Bearing 015, said the radar operator. Low altitude, fast mover. The watch officer turned. Confirm that track. Another pulse. The blip strengthened. Then a second one appeared beside it. Two aircraft approaching at over 500 knots. The captain, James Reynolds, entered the CIC like a ghost in blue light. His voice was calm, steady, trained by decades of storms. What do we have? Two fast movers inbound from the north. Profile matches F-16A Block 15Zs, Venezuelan origin. Reynolds frowned. Venezuela's aging squadron. Cold War relics running on spare parts and luck. They had no business this far north. Transmit standard hail, he ordered in. A sailor hit the mic. Unknown aircraft approaching USS Jason Dunham. This is United States Navy warship DDG-109, operating in international waters. Identify yourself, over. Static. The silence thickened. Try again. Still nothing. The two blips were now 28 miles out, accelerating. Reynolds exchanged a look with his combat director. Weapons free on my mark. For now, Condition 2, bring all defensive systems online. Sirens moaned through the ship, red lights flashing in every quarter. Sailors scrambled to battle stations, strapping into consoles, loading missile cells, securing hatches. Above deck, the phalanx CIWS turrets swiveled toward the horizon, their six-barreled Gatling guns humming alive. The Aegis radar arrays locked in, sweeping the sky with invisible precision. On the bridge, Reynolds leaned toward the glass. The horizon glowed faintly blue now. Dawn was coming, and with it, something darker. Then the first visual confirmation came. Two specks, low, slicing through the dawn mist. Range, 21 miles, the combat officer called. No response to hails. The captain's lips tightened. They're baiting us. Inside the CIC, one of the younger sailors whispered, "Sir, maybe they're testing." The deck shook. Everyone froze. The vibration was subtle at first. Then came the unmistakable roar of jet engines outside. Low, thunderous, slicing the air above the destroyer. The Venezuelan F-16s had arrived. Visual contact confirmed. Two bogies, bearing 015, altitude decreasing. Reynolds cut him off. Track them. Don't blink. He looked through the window. Two gray shapes tore across the sky, dipping low enough for their wingtips to scrape the light. And then, the words that shattered the morning. Missile launch! Missile launch! Two streaks of white smoke erupted from the fighters. Heat seekers! The CIC became chaos. Voices overlapping. Alarms screaming. Reynolds slammed his hand against the console. Deploy countermeasures. All defensive systems. Active now. On deck, the ship exhaled clouds of silver chaff into the air, filling the sky with metal dust. Flares burst along the waterline, blazing like miniature suns. Inside, radar operators watched the two missiles arc downward, hungry, hunting for heat signatures. But the Jason Dunham ran on water-cooled turbines. She gave off almost no heat at all. The missiles faltered, confused, their trails twisting into spirals. One dove into the sea with a hiss. The second corkscrewed high before detonating midair, a bright white flash swallowed by dawn. Then silence. Only the wind. On the bridge, Reynolds stood unmoving, his reflection framed against the fading explosion. His voice was quiet, heavy. They just fired on a U.S. warship. No one spoke. The reality hit like a blow to the chest. The destroyer had been attacked. Not provoked, not threatened.
Keep me posted on
Attacked.
the turbine output.
Reynolds turned. His tone was measured, final. Battle stations, weapons hot. Sir, rules of engagement? Reynolds didn't hesitate. They fired first. We finish it. Across the ship, switches flipped, circuits armed, systems hummed. The war machine awoke. Beneath the deck, the Mk-41 launch cells filled with compressed air. On screens, the enemy aircraft glowed like predators against the radar grid. Outside, the sea boiled with motion. The Venezuelan pilots, unaware their missiles had failed, looped for another run, diving to 1,200 feet, skimming the waves. Their helmets reflected the sunrise, sweat tracing down their necks. One of them muttered in Spanish, "Hold formation. They can't risk international fire." He was wrong. Inside the Jason Dunham, the combat director's hand hovered over the command console. Targets locked. SM-6 is armed. Reynolds' eyes never left the horizon. Fire. The order left his lips like a trigger pulled. Deep inside the steel hull, the USS Jason Dunham came alive. Hydraulic doors split open across her deck, and from the dark chambers of the Mk-41 vertical launch system, a column of fire erupted. One missile, then another, then two more. The SM-6 interceptors screamed into the sky, shattering the dawn with light. The air trembled under their ascent. Trails of molten exhaust slashed upward, reflected in the calm water like twin blades of gold. Every vibration, every shock wave rolled through the hull, a sound that was not noise but power, deliberate and absolute. At 40,000 feet per minute, the missiles locked onto their prey. Their guidance systems fed by radar from the Aegis arrays, precise, merciless, unblinking. Each missile worth more than a mansion, each second measured in lives. Above the sea, the Venezuelan pilots saw them coming. From a distance, they looked like comets, silent, perfect, unstoppable. One pilot broke formation, his hands gripping the stick so hard his gloves squealed. He dumped flares, rolled hard to port, and gunned the afterburner until the cockpit shook. The horizon spun, the G-forces pressed into his chest, his heart pounding faster than the jet's engine. Below, the ocean caught the reflection of his fear, a streak of silver chasing fire. The first SM-6 reached him in less than 12 seconds. Its proximity fuse armed at 900 meters, its warhead detonating into a cloud of tungsten fragments hotter than a furnace. The shock wave ripped across the sky, scattering vapor and metal alike. The jet disintegrated mid-turn, one moment whole, the next a scattering of burning shards tumbling into the sea. The second pilot dove hard toward the deck, skimming just above the waves. Salt spray blasted across his canopy as he juked left, then right, trying to outrun the radar lock. He fired his jamming pod, spewing a storm of false echoes into the air. For a heartbeat, the radar picture blurred. Then the Jason Dunham's electronic warfare suite recalibrated. The SLQ-32V6 system sliced through the interference and fed a perfect mirrored signal back into the jet's sensors, a ghost image that fooled its instruments. In the pilot's cockpit, the world went dark. Instruments flashed red, systems crashed. His last clear sight was the reflection of the ocean before him, calm and endless. Then the second missile struck. The explosion bloomed like a sun over the Caribbean. Flames spiraled into the clouds. Shock waves rippled across the water, sending a wall of spray against the destroyer's hull. Every sailor on deck stood still, faces lit by the orange glare. It was over in 46 seconds. The two F-16s were gone, erased as if the sea itself had swallowed them whole. Smoke drifted across the dawn. The Jason Dunham's guns powered down, their barrels cooling. The smell of cordite lingering like ghosts. The only sounds were the hiss of the waves and the distant pop of burning fuel raining into the water. Inside the Combat Information Center, data scrolled across the screens. 2 radar contacts lost, 2 heat blooms confirmed. "Targets neutralized," said a calm voice. The words echoed like a eulogy. Reynolds stood on the bridge, eyes fixed on the horizon. His face was expressionless, but his grip on the railing had turned his knuckles white. The adrenaline still pumped through his veins, but beneath it ran something heavier. The weight of consequence. He had seen combat before, but this was different. This was not war declared, it was war revealed. Outside, the first light of morning broke fully over the Caribbean. The ocean glowed like mercury, serene again. From above, it would have looked as if nothing had happened, but the air was thick with the invisible residue of violence. Heat, ions, the ghost of destruction suspended between sea and sky. Below deck, sailors returned to their stations. Some exhaled relief, others stared blankly at screens still flickering with traces of fire. No one spoke. There was no triumph in the room, only a cold awareness of what had just been unleashed. A petty officer wiped his face with a trembling hand, his headset damp with sweat. Another crewman whispered something about how fast it all happened. Nobody answered. The smell of metal and ozone clung to the air. Outside, pieces of burning wreckage drifted down like dying stars, scattering across the waves. A helmet, a wing fragment, a piece of fuselage twisted into unrecognizable art. The sea took it all, folding it under without sound. In the command center, an operator ran diagnostics, confirming weapon expenditure and radar logs. Every entry was time-stamped, every missile accounted for. The battle would be dissected later by analysts and politicians, turned into numbers and graphs. But for the men on board, it was something more primitive, a clash of survival instinct and cold precision. On the bridge, Captain Reynolds finally exhaled, the tension easing from his shoulders. His voice came low, barely audible against the hum of the ship. He didn't speak to anyone in particular. This isn't over. He was right. Far beyond the horizon, satellites had already captured the engagement. Signals were bouncing across networks, through command channels, into rooms where maps glowed red. Somewhere over Washington, a general was waking to the words, U.S. warship attacked. Somewhere in Caracas, an aide was rushing down a hallway with the news that 2 pilots had gone silent. And yet, for a brief, suspended moment, there was only the ship and the sea. The sun breached the horizon, its light glinting off the destroyer's steel hull, off the smoke, off the calm that followed fury. It was a beautiful morning, too beautiful for what it had just witnessed. As the crew reset their stations, the last echoes of battle drifted away, leaving behind a silence different from before. Not peaceful, but heavy. A silence that understood what had been done and what might come next. From a distance, the Jason Dunham looked serene, steady, indifferent. But within its steel skin, hearts still raced, minds replayed. And the ghost of 2 burning jets hung somewhere between memory and guilt. The Caribbean Sea, as always, said nothing, but the world would not stay quiet for long. By 4:55 a.m., the sea was still again, but it was the wrong kind of stillness, the kind that followed judgment. Over the calm horizon, trails of black smoke coiled upward from where the Venezuelan jets had fallen. The smell of burning fuel drifted faintly across the waves. Inside the USS Jason Dunham, the red alert lights dimmed, replaced by the cool white of standby operations. Crew members moved methodically, performing checks, recording data, sealing missile hatches. The battle had lasted less than a minute, but its echo would ripple for decades. 2 jets gone, 2 pilots lost, 1 line crossed. The sea swallowed the wreckage, but the satellites didn't. Far above, American eyes in orbit transmitted everything. Launch vectors, infrared flares, heat signatures of explosions, straight to command centers thousands of miles away. In Washington, lights flickered on across the Pentagon's E-ring. Within minutes, secure lines buzzed awake, screens filled with tracking data and encrypted timestamps. The incident was no longer a secret. Back in the Caribbean, the Jason Dunham maintained position, its engines idling. The crew's adrenaline had faded into quiet efficiency. They didn't know yet that the world beyond the horizon was already catching fire. At Roosevelt Roads Naval Base in Puerto Rico, the night shift had just ended when the call came through. The airfield's silence shattered beneath the shriek of klaxons. Ground crews sprinted toward hangars, boots splashing through puddles left by the tropical night. 2 F-A-18E Super Hornets were ordered airborne. Pilots ran with helmets half-fastened, the smell of jet fuel burning the air. Floodlights turned the tarmac into daylight as the engines roared to life. The afterburners ignited, a rolling thunder that shook the hangars and the jungle beyond. Within seconds, the Hornets leapt from the runway, tearing through the morning haze, leaving behind only heat and dust. The Caribbean sky flared alive once more. They climbed to 30,000 feet, wings slicing the humid air. Below them, the ocean shimmered, calm, indifferent, scarred. One of the pilots glanced at his radar display, seeing the blip of the Jason Dunham ahead, steady and waiting. His voice stayed low, professional. No anger, no thrill, just duty. The two fighters swept into formation, banking east toward the edge of Venezuelan airspace. Their mission wasn't combat, it was deterrence. To show the world that the United States still stood guard. Over Caracas, dawn broke crimson, the color of alarm. The Venezuelan Air Defense Command buzzed with chaos. Screens filled with empty radar plots, scrambled signals, emergency frequencies. 2 call signs missing. No response, no telemetry. Gone. Officers shouted over each other, demanding answers. Technicians checked the network again and again, but the truth was simple and cruel. Nothing was left to find. The pilots had vanished from the grid, from the chain of command, from life itself. At 6:00 a.m., President Nicolas Maduro appeared on state television, his face pale under harsh lights. His voice carried anger wrapped in desperation. The broadcast claimed that American warships had violated Venezuelan sovereignty, firing on defensive patrol aircraft. The footage that followed was grainy, unverified, streaks of light over the sea, explosions blurred by distance. But the message was clear. The narrative flipped within minutes. Across Latin America, screens filled with headlines. U.S. aggression in the Caribbean. Imperial warship destroys Venezuelan jets. But north of the equator, the Pentagon was already prepared. At 6:31 a.m., a briefing began inside the Situation Room. Commanders presented radar recordings from the Jason Dunham, clean, time-stamped, irrefutable. Every frequency logged, every trajectory documented, every radio silence preserved. The world saw 2 lines cross 12 nautical miles into international airspace. 2 missiles launched first. Evidence spoke louder than speeches. By 7:00 a.m., 2 more destroyers, USS Gravely and USS Porter, had left Norfolk, cutting through the Atlantic toward the Caribbean. On the flight deck of the aircraft carrier, USS George H.W. Bush, deck crews painted mission codes onto the wings of Super Hornets. The carrier's island tower glowed under the morning sun like a rising monument of power. Above the Caribbean, the 2 Hornets that had taken off from Puerto Rico were now circling, silent sentinels tracing loops in the air. Their flight path skirted the invisible edge of Venezuelan territory, a line drawn not on water but in willpower. At 25,000 feet, the sky shimmered with heat haze. Clouds stretched like ribbons beneath them. The pilots flew in radio silence, guided only by radar sweeps from the Jason Dunham below. The destroyer looked small from above, a silver-gray blade cutting through glassy water. Around it, the sea glowed with an eerie serenity, as if pretending nothing had happened. From his cockpit, one pilot watched the faint plume of smoke still curling from the earlier strike zone. He imagined the wreckage sinking, twisted metal drifting into darkness. War was always clean from the air, distant, mathematical, bloodless. But he knew better. On board the Jason Dunham, sailors resumed routine duties. Some leaned against the rails, staring at the waves. Others sat alone in the mess hall, their hands wrapped around coffee mugs that had gone cold. The adrenaline had burned away, replaced by a strange calm that felt almost unreal. No cheers, no triumph. Just the endless rhythm of machinery and the awareness that the line between peace and catastrophe had thinned to nothing. Far out at sea, sonar picked up faint echoes, the movement of distant ships, possibly Venezuelan naval patrols mobilizing from Puerto Cabello. The sound technicians listened, their expressions neutral, though every heartbeat said what they wouldn't. Escalation was coming. At 8:00 a.m., the Jason Dunham's radar picked up multiple signals to the east. Unidentified aircraft forming a loose grid 40 miles beyond range. They weren't advancing, not yet, but the message was unmistakable. The captain watched the monitor on his face unreadable. The sea was calm, but his mind wasn't. The first shot had been fired. The next would decide everything. Above him, the Hornets shifted formation. their vapor trails painting a pale X across the morning sky, a silent warning written in light. Below, the destroyer's crew kept their stations. Every sailor moved with precision, like pieces of an orchestra waiting for the next cue. The ocean was vast, endless, quiet. But beneath that quiet, something heavy stirred, not in the water but in men's hearts. The war might not have been declared, but it had already begun to breathe. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the next order was already forming. By 8:00 a.m., the sun stood high over the Caribbean, but its warmth could not touch the cold tension that hung over the sea. The ocean shimmered like molten metal, stretching toward the horizon in a blinding sheen. In that light, the USS Jason Dunham seemed less a ship and more a shadow, a gray blade waiting for the next command. Then, a low hum filled the air, distant at first, then multiplying, deepening. On the eastern horizon, a shape appeared, then another, then more. The USS Gravely and USS Porter advanced from the Atlantic, their radar domes rotating, decks armed, crews standing ready. The destroyers moved with slow, deliberate precision, each step measured like choreography. Within the hour, they had formed a triangle formation, a moving wall of steel and circuitry, sweeping radar every 6 seconds, their collective range blanketing over 40 nautical miles. Above them, the sky cracked with sound. 10 F-35C Lightning II jets sliced through the stratosphere, rising from the decks of the carrier USS George H.W. Bush far to the north. The aircraft climbed in perfect formation, sunlight glinting off their carbon skin. To the world below, they looked like shards of polished obsidian, silent, lethal, inevitable. They weren't coming to fight. They were coming to be seen. At Roosevelt Roads, news crews gathered on the coast, cameras catching the silhouettes streaking overhead. In Caracas, air raid sirens wailed, though no bombs would fall. The sound alone was enough to send fear trembling through the capital. The United States had not declared war. It didn't need to. Power, properly displayed, spoke for itself. By noon, global networks were on fire. Oil prices surged nearly 8% in hours. Shipping insurers tripled premiums across the Caribbean corridor. Stock markets jittered, analysts debated. Politicians scrambled to control the narrative. The footage of the strike had gone viral. The bright explosion over the Caribbean replayed endlessly, silent, haunting, stripped of context. At the United Nations, diplomats argued beneath blue flags, words twisting through the air like smoke. Venezuela demanded condemnation, reparations, an apology. The United States offered evidence, clean, sharp, unassailable. 2 missiles launched first, 2 lives lost by their own aggression. And as the speeches clashed, the ships held their line. 3 destroyers anchored in perfect symmetry, their radar pings echoing across the deep. No one dared cross that invisible perimeter. The air above the formation shimmered with heat and quiet defiance. Every 30 seconds, the F-35s traced another pass overhead, contrails carving invisible borders in the sky. The Jason Dunham's deck glistened under the noon sun. Crew members moved slower now, exhausted, drained by the hours of alertness. Yet beneath the fatigue, there was focus, the kind that came only from men and women who understood that peace had to be held, not assumed. Inside the Combat Information Center, monitors tracked thousands of blips, friendly, unknown, hostile, all suspended in motionless tension. Data streamed across screens like a heartbeat. Reynolds stood behind the combat director, silent. His reflection shimmered against the glass panel. A man caught between duty and memory. The faces of his sailors were calm, unreadable, trained into stoicism. But he could feel the heaviness in the air. Not fear, not victory, but something colder. He looked down at his hands, still trembling faintly from the aftershock of adrenaline. Then at the radar screen, a clean circle now, empty. The battle was over, but his mind replayed every flash, every explosion, every sound of the ocean swallowing metal. War was always quieter than people imagined. At 12:15 p.m., a secure transmission came through. A statement drafted by the Pentagon, read aloud across global news channels within the hour. Any hostile action against United States forces will be met with an immediate, overwhelming, and decisive response. It was not a threat, it was physics. Across the Atlantic, European allies voiced support. OPEC ministers convened emergency sessions. In Moscow and Beijing, officials watched silently, measuring every movement on the map. And in Caracas, the streets grew quiet. Fighter bases went dark. The country's remaining F-16s were grounded indefinitely, their hangar doors sealed by silence and embarrassment. As the sun began to descend, the Caribbean shifted color. Gold to amber, amber to blood. The destroyers remained in formation, holding station as the light dimmed. Their shadows stretched long across the sea, merging into one vast silhouette, an emblem of endurance. The crew of the Jason Dunham moved through evening checks. The deck was calm again, the sea forgiving. Below deck, engines throbbed in a steady heartbeat, a rhythm as old as the ship itself. Somewhere below, in a quiet berth, a young sailor wrote in his log. His handwriting was uneven, the words simple. 2 planes attacked, both destroyed. Nobody cheered. Outside, the night gathered once more. The stars returned, faint and scattered. From the bridge, Reynolds watched them appear one by one, reflected in the ocean like fragments of shattered glass. The world would call this victory. He knew better. Power was not measured by who struck first, but by who endured the silence afterward. At 20 hunting hours, final reports were transmitted to the Fleet Command. The hatches closed, the guns went cold. The destroyers began to move again, slow and deliberate, engines churning the black water beneath them. From a distance, the formation looked like 3 streaks of light drifting across the dark. Guardians of an ocean that remembered everything. The radio waves carried no sound, only encrypted whispers. No orders were shouted, no speeches made, just quiet discipline. A fleet that understood its own gravity. By midnight, the crisis had stabilized. The news cycle moved on. Politicians rephrased, analysts reinterpreted. The moment blurred into data and commentary. But at sea, reality lingered. The sailors of the Jason Dunham stood their night watch under a sky scattered with stars. The ocean was glass again, hiding everything that had fallen beneath. The air smelled of salt and steel. In that calm, the meaning of deterrence became something more human. It wasn't just missiles or might. It was the ability to stop, to hold, to stand unbroken when provoked. The sea does not remember names. It remembers echoes. And somewhere in that vast stillness, 2 faint lights still burned beneath the surface, the remnants of a war that never truly began. The Caribbean slept again, but it was a different kind of sleep, not peaceful, not pure, the kind that came after violence, when the world holds its breath and wonders if it has learned anything at all. The camera of imagination pulls back, rising high, leaving the destroyers small beneath the endless blue. The sun edges over the curve of the earth, washing the ocean in silver. The narration, if there were one, would fade into the wind. America does not start wars, it ends them. And when the sea finally goes quiet, it carries that truth in every wave. That deterrence, when held with restraint, is the most dangerous piece of all.